On the Dallas Opera Network, you're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's Opera Box Score. I'm your host, George Cederquist, joined this week on America's Talk radio show about opera by Oliver Camacho, Matt Cummings, Weston Williams, and Ashlee Hardgrave. All right, it's our Halloween Spook-tacular this week. We talk terrifying operas and watch some nightmarish scenes. And then Oliver and Matt go inside the huddle with the tall and talented tenor Benjamin Bernheim. Warning, Oliver has become a falling hazard, and if you watch carefully, you can literally see the moment he falls in love with the French matinee idol. That's scary. Plus, in the 2-minute drill, if you have to wear a mask to go to the opera, can it be a Halloween mask? Oliver Camacho on the show tonight, of course. How are you?
I'm great. Sorry I don't have a costume. I'm such a Halloween grump. I'd like to stay away from home so I don't have to deal with kids. I actually love kids. I just don't want to give them diabetes.
Weston Williams.
Well, as you can see, I have a costume. I'm the ghost of former Alabama football coach, Bear Bryant, as you can tell by the houndstooth pattern on my ghost ether. And also a shout out to my mother who, no joke, sent this to me because it has the little OBS logo right there. Isn't that great?
Oh, that's
Isn't that adorable?
Branding.
Amazing.
Matt Cummings, tell us about your costume.
I'm going as the concept of sweater weather because today it snowed in Chicago.
It did.
And Ashlee Hardgrave, you look fantastic.
Thank you. Any excuse to wear a wig. And also, hope is contagious, so I am the hope monster.
Very spooky indeed.
The Dodgers certainly hopefully on the brink of a World Series win, taking on Tampa Bay in Texas, in Arlington, of all places, tomorrow night. Dallas Cowboys, by the way, have won 2 games. That would be 3 less than the Cleveland Browns. Matt, how's your team doing?
The Pittsburgh Steelers are still undefeated, and everyone in my hometown is probably holding on to that for dear life.
Tell us about the Bears, Ashlee.
Well, if you're listening to us, the game is already over, but it's not over for us. It's happening right now. Rams have the ball, still scoreless in the first.
The time-space continuum just exploded. Let's talk some opera.
Chalk Talk on Opera Box Score.
Happy Halloween, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us, wherever you are, whoever you're listening. Halloween. I like Halloween. I really get into Halloween.
We couldn't tell from your masked intro there. The theatricality. All of our listeners who are listening on the audio-only version, you are missing out. Go to the Dallas Opera Network, find this episode, and watch George whip off his terrifying mask and his adorable tricorn hat in real sort of time and just feel
eyes
it
wide
with
shut
us.
Type of deal. So.
Let's hope not.
Halloween is suitably spooky. We thought we'd let you know of some of our most scary opera choices. For me, without question, one of the scariest productions I've seen recently was the production of Dvorak's Rusalka at the Komische Oper in Berlin. This was in 2016 when I was in Germany for a little bit.
Drink.
And everybody with the drinking jokes already. I thought we were going to get rid of that when we moved to video.
Some carryovers are too good to give up.
This production was directed by the intendant of the Komische Oper since 2012, the Australian Barry Kosky.
Barry.
Let's just take a quick look at the promo clip from the Komische Oper, and then I'll tell you 3 things that really freak me out.
All right, then. So, because we are a video format now, we have for our listening audience who are doing podcasts only, we're going to have you explain what we just saw, George.
Yeah, well, I'm sure most of the audience at the Camacho Oprah also wanted to have it explained to them that they were watching. Basically, there's 3 moments in this production that really stand out to me. First of all, the transformation of Rusalka from mermaid into human being is done in this brutal way where basically like
It's surgical. That's what it is.
Surgical. It's surgical. Right. Yeah. She's not a beautiful mermaid. She's sort of like a whale in terms of the costume design. And basically her spine is sort of dug out of her back and ripped out of her. Like she's being deboned like a fish. It definitely gave me the willies when I was watching it.
The free willies.
Absolutely horrifying. And very sort of like on brand for Barry Kosky too, because when I hear Barry Kosky, I always think of the silent film Magic Flute. That's like my go-to thought. And there's a lot of like influence of like the German expressionism in terms of like the design and the sort of the grim but playful aesthetic, which is very Halloween-y to me. So like even though it is gruesome to see the tail being cut off with a knife, it's also got like just that little bit of Halloween delight, I think.
Yeah, there's definitely a Tim Burton whimsy to it, but can you describe the set design? Because that's sort of, to me, problematic. And maybe you can defend it, so.
Absolutely. So the scenic design, and if you watch the video, it's relatively close up, but there is essentially one entrance onto the stage. The entire stage is like a big band shell. It's just a single wall with a single door center stage. It is so claustrophobic that it just freaks you out looking at it, that there's only one way in and there's only one way out.
Definitely drives home the difference between like European Brothers Grimm style fairy tales and the Disney movies that we grew up watching.
Absolutely.
The third thing that really freaked me out about the production, and it has to do with that sort of band shell structure that is on the stage with that single entrance. So the band shell, it has a molding that kind of runs around its perimeter to give this sense of an interior. As it turned out, there was a projection that mimicked the outline of the molding on that proscenium arch. And at certain moments in the show, that molding projection would just rock back and forth from left. And it was so slight. And you were like, oh man, I think I'm tripping and seeing stuff. Then you were like, wait a second, is the whole stage moving? And it was so delicately done, and it made you want to puke.
Like seasickness.
Just like seasickness.
I love that these are the things we're finding out that we want in an opera. We want to feel a little nauseous. We want to be a little freaked out. We like it. We like a monochromatic moment of shades of black.
Exactly. And then, of course, that production, you got some bloody hand stains on the wall. You have a skeleton wearing jeweled earrings, like making out with other people. But that's pretty par for the course for the
old hat, really.
It's old hat.
Honestly, that's a mood.
Weston, what was your spooky Halloween opera?
Well, I had to really kind of think about this one because, I wasn't going to go fully mainstream with it. But then I started to get out of some really weird territory and had to pull myself back a little bit. So my pulled back choice is Karl-Heinz Stockhausen's Samstag aus Licht, which, is that classic that everyone knows and loves.
We've
seen it. We've seen it so many times.
We stand hard.
It's so good.
Bob-O-M, Magic Flute.
It
was in my audition package for a while. So yeah.
It's sort of the opposite of Matt's current sweater weather costume. It's like it gives you the opposite sort of experience. It is not cozy. So if you don't know the Licht cycle, you should look it up because it's absolutely wild.
Safe to say no one knows the Licht cycle.
That's also fair. And the reason for that is there's not really
I don't even think the people who perform in it know it.
Oh, absolutely not. But that's part of the charm of this piece, I think. And charm is not a word we usually use to describe the Licht cycle, but I use it.
Or indeed Halloween.
Or Stockhausen. But there's a certain, basically, each opera in the cycle is a different day of the week, and they all center around sort of an archetypal character in usually religious mythology. There's Thursday's Saint Michael, and Samstag, which is the second opera that was written in the cycle, even though it's in no particular order, stars, for want of a better word, Lucifer. And you, right there, you've got the instant mix of like that late modernist sort of weirdness combined with this like sonic hellscape that just really hits you in that perfect Halloween mood. Because Stockhausen was really trying to kind of push the boundaries of conventional theater, this is not like an opera you would go in to see and you have like a little orchestra pit and you have a nice little proscenium. It takes place all around you and above you. In the stage directions, for example, in the clip we're about to see, Lucifer has come out and he's singing, he's having a grand old time about what no one knows. It doesn't matter. He's just being spooky. But his face is supposed to be reflected in the orchestra, which is built up on, I believe it's 5 or 6, either 5 or 6, I can't remember, stories right in front of the audience. And there's brass instruments all around you with bespoke percussion instruments, creating this really sinister soundscape, and very specific lighting choices. And at the end of the opera, they're supposed to like take coconuts and crack them up. That's not a joke. They also release a wild bird, also not a joke.
That's
but, like,
from Monty Python.
While you're in it, it really is something that I think 1,000 people could watch Samstag aus Licht and all tell different stories about it. Some would be sad, some would be horrifying, some would be funny, and that's just ghost stories around a campfire, right? And that's why this operatic hellscape is so perfect. This is from a production conducted by Maxime Pascal, and Lucifer is played by the baritone Damien Pass.
Doesn't get much spookier than that.
I mean, I'm going to have to agree with you, Weston. That was pretty horrifying. And there's some musical advice. I mean, I'm not so good at explaining music to people who are not musicians, but there's this repeated harmony or this chord that the band is playing, which is already like an atonal dissonant chord. You can't quite figure out what harmony it is. Mm-hmm. And then Lucifer enters in on probably the lowest note of his registration.
Absolutely.
That was hot.
Yeah, and the chord has a bunch of high overtones in it, and when you have that juxtaposition of very low and very high, that always creeps me out, you know?
It's very unsettling, right? Because you associate the deep tones evolutionarily with, you know, thunder, threats from a distance, but high tones are close. You hear them more closely because they don't travel as far. So you're getting on a very deep psychological level this feeling of run, but the entire opera is like that, and it surrounds you completely. It's hard to fully explain just from a video or from audio, but it really does surround you, and it's such a great piece.
Even the design on that, I mean, Damien Pass, great, perfect choice to play that part, Damien. I mean, he's bathed in this green light, and he's got this sort of like glycerin sweat on his bare chest.
He's got those washboard abs.
Very strange. Before we wrap it up, Oliver, Matt, and Ashlee, give us your Halloween opera. Oliver.
You know, we just saw it last year. Wes and I, we went to see Dog Days by David T. Little.
Friend of the show.
Yeah, little did I know how precious.
Did you know?
the plot of that show is. I mean, it's about families sort of trapped at home with each other and trying to survive an apocalyptic event and getting
familiar.
desperate and running out of resources, and toxic masculinity rears its ugly head. Yeah, and you think of like these people that are like Proud Boys and stuff like that, like all these parallels with that opera. It's horrifying, and it's a really, really fascinating show. So, Dog Days.
So good, so good.
Matt Cummings, what is your Halloween spooktacular opera?
For me, I always come back to Turn of the Screw, which is like not only the quintessential ghost story, but it's the what in the world is going on in this story. Every production has a little bit different take on it because the opera is so ambiguous about what is happening at this manor. And it's also going to be very different than what Netflix thinks is happening in the Haunting of Bly Manor. But the opera has very, very atmospheric music by Benjamin Britten to capture that kind of ethereal spookiness.
Ashlee, what opera really freaks you out?
I'm going to go Dialogue of the Carmelites, not just because of the last few scenes, but because the notion of nuns singing together at any moment gives me a little bit of heebie-jeebies.
It's almost always a threat.
Well, of course, you can let us know what you think is a creepy opera that's perfect for Halloween. You just email us, operaboxscore@gmail.com.
Huddle up. Let's go inside the huddle.
So just about 2 years ago, Benjamin Bernheim made his American debut at Lyric Opera of Chicago. And I have to confess that sometimes I look at the Lyric Opera season brochure and I know that they're investing in certain singers and certain shows are going to have like the marquee, names. And then there are some shows like, who's that, And Benjamin Bernheim was one of those people. It's like, who is this guy? They're giving him the role of Faust. I haven't even heard of him. And I was there with Toby, and Matt was also in the audience, and it was the Prima. And I was there really to cheer on Eileen Perez and Christian Van Horn. And Benjamin Bernheim comes out, and he's tall and he's handsome and his tone is heaven. And we get to the cavatina, Salut, Demeure Chaste Pure, the aria everybody knows. And he delivers this thing like he was born to sing it with like a soaring high C. And he stands right down, downstage center, right in the spot. And it's like, who am I hearing? Where am I? This is incredible. And I became an instant fan. Matt?
Stan, even. Yeah, it was, I had almost exactly the same experience in that you're listening, you're like, oh, this guy's pretty good. We'll come back to that. We'll put a pin in that and see, how he does in the big moments. And man, did he deliver. It was a star-making performance.
So, we asked him about his influences and maybe some of the singers that he listens to and why he is such a specialist in this French style. Can you talk about the way you think about French opera, French romantic opera, and your approach and maybe some of the singers who you are trying to model yourself after?
Well, you forgot to name one, which is Roberto Alagna, because he was the first actually for me to hear. But actually, also there was one because he was a baritone, and Gérard Souzet, who was really fantastic. Yeah. When I was a kid, my grandmother, she had an old tourne-disc thing at home, and with this old 33 tours, we say in French. Big discs, and there was José Van Damme, there was Gérard Souzet, there was Domingo, of course, but Gérard Souzet and his art of phrasing the French was really exceptional, especially because I think that a lower voice has bigger chances to get the words and to get all the text in all the tessitura. Being in a high tessitura is complicated, especially for sopranos, to make sure the French can be really tasted in the right way. But for me, it was Roberto Alagna, especially when I was, I think, 17, 18, when I heard one of his first CD, and I thought, wow, is it allowed to sing French like this? Because I heard a lot of French from a lot of singers, which I admire, like Nicolai Gueda and Placido Domingo. But I have to say that art, that way of singing French, that elegance in the sound and in the line was really something that I was in a way a bit shocked that it's possible. But for many years, actually, singing French was not easy for me. And actually, I try to avoid singing French because it's my instruments, my physiology was just not ready for that. And it took me a few years before I could really begin to really sing it the way I want, which is tending to the direction of these great artists.
So can you put your finger on the specific things that Roberto Alagna does or Gerard Souzet does? I mean, we talk about phrasing and we talk about diction, which is great for people like us who know right away what you mean. But are there like little details that you can point out for listeners so when they go to your recordings or they go see your performance, they can listen for what you're trying to do?
Well, what I'm trying to do is also making sure, I'm not blocked in a box of always singing the same phrases the same way. French has these amazing possibilities to sing the same phrase, but in different ways, to use an S differently, to use the liaison between the words. It's like when you see in La Vie Antérieure, j'ai longtemps habité. It's all possible. Both are right. None of them is incorrect. And to make sure that whatever I do in French is sort of instinctive, and I decide on the moment, do I use that or do I or not? And I don't think that people should speak French to be able to sing French the right way, but it is a language like also other language that has to be tasted. You cannot just arrive on stage and try to sing as same for Italian and Russian, but it comes with a lot of not work, but experiencing, going in a room with a pianist and trying, and there is nothing that is wrong. Of course, there are things that are not correct, but everything is possible. And also making mistakes in French make people singers able to find their own way through the French, because we are all different with this. Even though I admire Roberto Alagna, I don't really have the same approach with Roberto Alagna. Jonas Kaufmann has an amazing French. His French is perfect, but it's the Jonas Kaufmann French. So I think everyone has a different shade or a different approach of it. Nicolas Guéda also. So I think it's about making little mistakes and about trying and singing and not trying to get it right at the first time or at the 10th time, because now I sing Faust or Manon or Romeo, and in 10 years it will be different. In 10 years I will have different ways to sing it. I will be able to make phrases differently, and this is what is amazing with singing, and not only with French, but about French. I recommend just to try and to listen and to be curious and to talk to French people, to talk to Belgium, Swiss, French, Canadian people about their experience of their own French. This is very important.
And that kind of nuance really does come through in your singing. I can say as someone who studied singing and studied French, but I'm far from fluent. And it kind of contrasts with the more international approach to singing in all of these languages that you get on the opera scene in general. Why do you think that kind of very specific national style or linguistics-based style is relatively rare today?
It's rare, but also I don't think that there is a French, I think, yes, there is a French style depending on the period, but to be honest, when I compare with a lot of my colleagues, for example, we sang French together with Sabine Devielle at a concert, at a recital in Zurich, and we have different approaches, and I love her French, and it fits her voice, it fits her color. Today, I think that we are trying to find also a shortcut. I think the IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet, is a good solution to approach something, but then to really go deep into the text and deep into the comprehension, it's about time, and it's about reading the text and trying to understand it. So I think that now we have these generations of singers of today. Before it was the Alagna generation, and before that another one. And in 10 years will come new generations of French and non-French singers who will sing the French repertoire with their own approach. And I don't think that we should be in a box and sing that way only, because Some people need to roll the R's. I don't want to in French, but I have to flip it sometimes to make sure that my R's are understandable and can be heard. But it's all a matter of experience, and with the time it changes. I don't know if I answered the question.
There's so much to go on this topic, and I think you're very kind to not name anybody. You know, it's like, oh, they're doing this wrong, whatever. You know, and you're complimentary.
There is no wrong.
Yeah, no, yeah, sure.
There is maybe less enjoyable for the audience, but there is no wrong.
But that's the thing. I mean, I don't know if audiences are learning because they're hearing A-list international singers singing Manon or whatever opera, and they hear all the critics and the recording labels are after these singers and promoting this is the best of our art right now, you know.
Yeah.
So
it's been like this for a long time. Yes, it's part of this. If you I think for the people who are listening and seeing this interview, it's also about the curiosity of the listeners and the people. If you just listen to the crust of the cake, which I call the big stars that are pushed forward, you only hear 1% of what exists. But if you begin to dig a bit, and if you begin to be curious about who sang what, then you will find a lot of other possibilities.
Yeah. Well, the knife cuts both ways, because we know that there are singers, you know, that are based in their countries who don't have the international career because maybe their technique isn't good enough to put them in the biggest houses. But you have both of these things right now. Like your sound is incredible and it's attractive, even if people don't know what the heck you're doing, you know, because you're very good on stage. The tone is gorgeous. You're physically free. Like there's all these components that make an opera star, you know, and that's why and plus you have a dimple. These are.
Does that help in Chicago?
Sure. I mean, look at my career. I mean, obviously. So.
I know that you were scheduled to do Romeo. That was that wasn't able to happen due to the pandemic. But is that one that is going to continue to be a calling card for you?
Yeah. No, actually, it was supposed to be my debut. I was sort of a crazy project. I do that a lot, actually. It was my first Romeo was my first singing at the Met, so it was going to be a lot of pressure, but also
that was going to be your role debut.
Yeah, it was going to be my role debut because
I thought you were saying your Met debut, but you're talking about.
It was my Met debut, and
my gosh,
which is it's part of this. I did that a lot in Vienna. I did my Nemorino debut with 3 days rehearsals. I did my Bohème debut in Zurich with very few rehearsals, and it's also doing these things that I realized that I had the nerves to go on stage, being prepared for myself, but not really totally like having weeks of rehearsals before. But sometimes it helps to jump into something, to jump in the unknown. So Romeo is something that I'm going to sing a lot in the next years, and I'm really happy about this because this is young, this is fresh, the line is perfect. As for Manon, that it's one of my favorite roles. Desgrieux is amazing because also Desgrieux allows me to develop and to sing all the colors I have in my voice, going from the pianissimo, also the mixed voice, to the fortissimo, I can really use everything that I have at my disposal at the moment with my voice. And so that's a great chance with this. And with Faust too. Faust is written in a different way. I have to say it's less young, but it's a fantastic role. And also Damnation de Faust is coming next season. Actually at the end of this season, I think. And also Werther and Hoffmann. So I try to not do everything at the same moment, because I think every time I do a new role, I have to digest it, because it's a long process, especially when I go to roles like Werther, who are emotionally very hard right. and complicated to digest, because you have to go through a lot of very complex feelings. You have to go deep, and I go deep in the characters. So Werther is coming next season if everything goes well. It will be in France. And Hoffmann, will do my debut in Germany next year in a new production. Hoffmann is a role that it's one of my dream role, because when I was younger, there was this VHS of Domingo singing it at
I know exactly which one you're talking about. Yeah,
Agnes Balza, right?
With Agnes Balza
and
I don't
Ileana Kutrubash, I think,
Ileana
is the Antonia.
Exactly, who was Antonia. She was amazing, and for me, Domingo was it. He was this youth, he had this energy, and Hoffmann is fantastic. I really love actually the progression of going to Olympia, Antonia, and Giulietta. And it's an opera that it's on my shoulders. It's on the shoulders of the tenor, who has to tell the story. It's his thing, and it's a big challenge. And I'm looking forward to seeing that.
So, I think Hoffmann. I mean, I'm crazy about this opera, but I think Hoffmann, more than any of the operas we talked about, has such a clear progression of being this youthful, naive, first time in love character to somebody who ends up becoming an alcoholic, maybe sex addict or drug addict, How do you, I mean, you haven't done it yet, but how are you thinking about approaching that? And also there's this throat busting, the Dieu de Calivresse, which is, I don't know how anybody sings that thing. It just sounds so awfully hard.
First, my approach is human, is what is it to fall in love numerous times, many times, and be disappointed and feel betrayed and feel horrible about myself and hating the entire world that it didn't work. This happens it is very human. Hoffmann is a very human guy that is just disappointed by life, but especially disappointed by himself because he keeps doing the same mistakes. So this is something that is very human, and ending alcoholic is, well, all ends, I think, enjoying life and drinking a lot, but he's doing this in a quite early age. And I think it is more about, there is something of Werther also in Hoffmann. There is something very depressed, very, how to say this, a character that is really self-tortured. And I also like these characters. You find that in Des Grieux, you find that in Hoffmann and in Werther. There is something very human. There is a human approach to find there, and this is what I like to think of. What would I say if it was me, being naive, falling in love with a robot, or falling in love with a woman like Antonia or Giulietta, because our hearts are human. And we have to go back, every performance, we have to go back to the beginning of it, to discover love for the first time, to whether you sing Romeo or Faust or Des Grieux, it has to be, you have to go from the beginning and be fresh and to be sort of a virgin in your mind. And it's also an exercise for a singer to repeat performances of an opera. You know the end, but you have to go through all these feelings. You have to go through all this singing to tell a story, because in the end we are storytellers. We tell a story to the audience, and this is what I like, is to make sure that I was how to say, not convenient, but I was convincing in telling that story to the audience, whatever the role is.
Even if you're too tall.
Even if I'm too tall, even if I'm too fat or too thin or whatever, or
So
maybe I have gray hair here, so maybe Romeo doesn't apply to me anymore. But it's I do have
I
to
always think about the first pictures of Roberto Alagna I ever saw was him in white tights. I think it was that Royal Opera House production of Romeo.
Yeah,
Where he makes
with, Leontina Vaduva, I think.
yeah.
Yeah,
He had great legs back then, so I think he was doing karate or something. I forget. He was. Anyway, we are running out of time, and there's a couple more questions I want to ask you.
Please.
I know you're in the middle of doing this recital tour right now, where you're singing "Les Nuits d'été" and songs by Duparc and songs by Strauss, which are all things that I'm crazy about. We don't always find singers with an international career, who are in demand to sing, Romeo and Faust and Namarino, who take time to put together a long recital. I mean, Les Nuits d'été by itself that's half of a program.
It's long and it's very difficult, and it's a big challenge vocally. When my coach, Karian Matheson, arrived in Zurich 5 years ago from the Metropolitan Opera in New York, we began to work, and we really developed a trust. She really ended up being my ears for my recording, being my judge. We have a deal. I told her, the day you hear me singing like you have to tell me, and you have to kick my ass, because it's our deal. She has to do that one day. I went through everything with her, and then we thought we were invited to do recitals. So while Les Nuits d'été, I will not be able to sing it the way I want until maybe I'm in 10 years or 15 years, because it's very low.
Yeah, I mean, Spectre de la Rose is not for a tenor to sing.
And I'm definitely not in my comfort zone when I sing Les Nuits d'été, which is exactly why it's interesting to sing Les Nuits d'été, because if I only sing things where I'm in my comfort zones, I think it's just too easy. So I like to bring a bit of challenge, and it's hard to sing it. I'm not able to sing it the way I want, but it's a big challenge. First, for the text. The text is very intense. It's not the Gounod world, it's not the Massenet world, it's the Berlioz world.
You are singing Morgan on this concert, and this is a song that everybody knows. Because it's such a popular song, do you have anything you want to say about it that maybe they should listen for in your interpretation?
Well, it's special also because actually I began to learn it before the lockdown in Europe. And I sang it. We worked on it with Karian numerous times, and we were never satisfied. She was not satisfied with the way she was playing it, and she told me she remembers she worked on it with very, very big pianists and conductors in New York, and I was never satisfied. And then after, there was this little thing thinking that every day in Europe and in the world we were thinking, this is the end of the world. Everybody's going to die from this virus, and this is a catastrophe, and it is a catastrophe. And at some point, I thought that this could be a message of hope, because the first phrase is, and tomorrow the sun will shine again. Whatever day it is, tomorrow it shines again. And it became to me, maybe it's my own version of Morgan. It's just about peace, about finding the peace in yourself, and knowing that there is hope every day for the day after.
Yeah.
So it may be not as deep as maybe you could see it, but it is my version of it, because it's also very human to think, today was a hard day. Today we lost so many people. Today the news are horrible. Today the world is suffering. People are suffering. Singers are not singing. People have to change their jobs. People have to choose between performing music or eat. And this is a catastrophe for our opera world and classical music world. And for me, this is suddenly this thing that, yes, but as long as there are people like me who are lucky enough and have the chance to sing, there is a message of hope saying, well, tomorrow is another day.
Und zu dem Strand, dem
as we in the States are watching, as the European houses and companies are starting to be able to open up a little bit and navigate this pandemic in a very different way than how we're experiencing it here. How has that adjustment to the COVID era performances been to you?
So for me, there was the first experience of the reopening of the Opera House in Zurich in July with the Sabine de Viel. We did a recital together, and it was half the audience could be there, but it was really, people respected this very well. Then it was Salzburg Festival in summer, where I was honored to be invited for the 100th year anniversary of the festival. And people really, really respected the rules very well. People wear the mask. People had some hydroalcoholic gel for the hands. People would wash their hands all the time. And people were so happy to finally go out and see a performance, because we also forget that for some people need sports, some people need Netflix, some people need Amazon Prime, and some people need opera.
Some people need portmanteaus executed correctly.
And they do too. That's true. But to be able to see. Oh, I'm very sorry. I received a little call.
Right. We're good.
Do you hear me?
Yeah, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Do you need to answer that call?
No, absolutely not. But
okay.
I just need to go back to you. Can you record it now?
It's fine. Yeah.
Perfect. And what was really amazing was to see how people were happy to be in an audience, to see the lights going down, and to see the singers going on stage. That was really, really, really strong. But also I see that in Europe, we are very lucky to have still opera houses performing. The whole production of Traviata in Bordeaux was a huge success. There was no problem, no case. We were extremely attentive and cautious with the virus and with being responsible for ourselves. Now I see, for example, in Zurich, I will begin the rehearsals from Manon next week, and we all singers have been designated in a group. So I am in the group with the singer singing Manon and the singer singing Lescaut. We are a group. We have to stick together during the rehearsals, and we are not allowed to get close to another group of singers who are also involved in other productions at the same time, to minimize the risks and to make sure that we keep really in mind that it's a danger, it's a potential danger. We still have private lives, we meet people, but we have to be very careful. So some opera houses come with very different protocols, and we have to be extremely respectful of that. And after Manon in Zurich, I will be in Munich for La Bohème, and I know they have a very different protocol. I am so lucky that I'm one of the singers that is able to sing today. That whatever protocol is in place, I'm just happy to comply, I have to say.
Well, tell the management of these opera companies that you talked to a pair of Americans, but it was through Zoom. So there was no chance of infection.
You're covered.
Zoom is safe.
Oh, I wish we could continue this conversation, but it's time to end. Please tell Carrie Ann Matheson that we would love to have her as a guest, because she sounds like a brilliant woman, and I'm so curious about her ideas.
I urge you, please, to do an interview with her, because she has so much to say. She has so much guidance and so much advice to give to young singers. She is really an amazing person and one of the greatest coach I've met. Yeah. And I'm very happy for her that she goes to San Francisco. I'm very happy for the singers there who will enjoy her experience, because now she has a European experience, and it's very important for American singers to know what is expected from them when they come to Europe, because it's a different world from the US, and I think she will do an amazing job there.
This just in, the 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
Lyric Opera Chicago has officially canceled its 2020-21 season due to ongoing concerns over COVID-19. Unfortunately, as Lyric announced the cancellation via video conference, artists concerned about the status of their contracts and health benefits were not permitted to ask questions or press the issue further during the meeting. A statement from the singer union read, quote, "AGMA will not tolerate this. We will reach out again soon with more specifics as to our plans and strategies. We will need your help, efforts, and talents. The fight isn't over yet. We are AGMA, and we will endure.
The Wiener Staatsoper has announced that it will make face masks mandatory during performances as of October 25th, even while patrons are seated. The decision came a day after Austria logged its biggest daily number of new COVID-19 cases during the whole pandemic.
Belgium's Prime Minister Alexander De Croo announced new COVID-19 restriction measures that limit the number of spectators in theaters and concert halls to a maximum of 200 people. Quote, 9 out of 10 provinces are at alarm level 4, and the last province is going in the same direction. We have one goal, which is to limit contacts that are not strictly necessary, said De Croo. The country has already shut down bars and restaurants and imposed an overnight curfew.
Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has also announced a set of drastic COVID-19 measures, which will include closures of opera houses, theaters, and concert halls until November 24th. The Prime Minister unveiled a full set of measures which also include the suspension of gyms, swimming pools, and wellness centers. Sports events and competitions will also be suspended.
And in response to the actions of Prime Minister Conte, Riccardo Muti published an open letter imploring him to open theaters. Quote, while I understand your difficult responsibilities, closing concert halls and theaters is a grave decision. To define a theatrical and musical activity as superfluous is an expression of ignorance and shows a lack of culture and sensitivity. He goes on, thousands of artists and workers from all sectors of the performing arts are insulted by this decision and left fearful for their futures.
In a most unconventional transaction, the San Francisco Conservatory of Music has purchased Opus 3 artists, which represents sopranos Christine Goerke and Lizette Oropeza, mezzo-sopranos Stephanie Blythe, Kate Lindsay, and Tamara Mumford, also represented, and bass Morris Robinson, along with baritone Nathan Gunn. Opus 3 president David Foster says the agency would have an arm's-length relationship with students at the San Francisco Conservatory and will continue to recruit clients from Juilliard, Curtis, Eastman, and elsewhere, adding that the sale was needed due to the unpredictable financial future caused by the pandemic.
Update from last week's drill. Looks like Weston's dunk on Quibi was the final nail in their coffin. The struggling short-form mobile video startup is shutting down after the company failed to find a buyer. As far as that Fabiano biodoc goes, may we suggest the Dallas Opera Network?
On the disabled list, Tamara Goshavili has pulled out of the Wiener Staatsoper production of Unida und Jägen due to health reasons, clearing the way for Australian soprano Nicole Carr to make her Staatsoper debut.
And exit stage right, Lithuanian bass Vaclavas Daunoras has died at the age of 84.
Soprano Rosanna Carteri has passed away at the age of 89. Making her debut in Rome at the age of 19 and La Scala at the age of 21, her career took off very early in a big way. She also made a number of very fine recordings, including a highly regarded Traviata for the RCA label with Cesare Valetti and Leonard Warren. She abandoned her career in her early 30s to devote herself to her family.
And on this day, October 26th, in 1685, it was the birth of Domenico Scarlatti, not to be confused with his father Alessandro, who has been immortalized by one yellow book that most of us own. In 1783, it was the first performance of Mozart's Great Mass in C minor in Salzburg with Constanze Weber, his wife, as soprano soloist. Technically not an opera unless you count Peter Sellers' inserting the Kyrie from this mass into Clemente di Tito. In 1811, it was the first performance of Rossini's L'Equivoco Stravagante in Bologna. In 1822, more bel canto, it was the first performance of Donizetti's Chiara e Serafina, also known as The Pirates, in Milan. In Milan. In 1907 is the first performance of Julius Bittner's Die Rote Gret in Frankfurt. That's an Austrian composer, of whom I'm sure Weston owns all the complete works. In 1917, it was the posthumous premiere of Mussorgsky's opera The Fair Dvorchinsky. And in 1961, it was the first performance of Robert Ward's Pulitzer Prize-winning opera The Crucible, based on the Arthur Miller play in New York City.
And that is your 2-minute drill. Oliver, tell us, what were we listening to there as we came out of the drill?
That was just a little bit of the Kyrie from the Mozart C minor Mass, Crucial 427, as sung by Janine de Beek in the Peter Sellers production of La Clemente di Tito. I think that was in the Netherlands opera. And Janine de Beek is flawless in this. She looks amazing.
She's flawless all the time.
Yeah,
but she's singing like a goddess in that. And like, you can just look at the chorus and they're like, I can't even do this right now because she sounds so incredible. So,
Ashlee, if you want to talk about Halloween Nightmares, lyric opera of Chicago and what's going on right now, what do you think?
I smell a labor war brewing at Lyric. Insiders are telling me this is probably going to get ugly based on the timing of when we record, as to when this came out, as to how quickly AGMA will act. I think we'll have more to talk about next week, so cross your fingers and hope for the best, but stay tuned.
I mean, we've seen so many artists already come forward and just say, how dare you, you know, bringing up the fact that it's a pandemic and this is the best you could do for us, you know?
Yeah.
We're going to take a deep dive into that likely next week as get some more details on that. Big problems, of course, horror stories coming out of Vienna, coming out of Belgium, and coming out of Italy, where we have a bit of a clash of the titans here. Matt Cummings, where do you fall on the Conte versus Muti fist fight?
So Ricardo, I get it. I really do. This pandemic has hit artists so hard, and no one really seems to care. But these lofty appeals imploring for things to just be reopened like nothing is wrong do not make people take the performing arts more seriously. They make us look shallow and frivolous and like we care more about our livelihoods than people's lives, because people are dying here. And investments need to be made in the arts into moving forward, but just reopening theaters is not the way to do that. You can't use a scalpel and say, well, these people can mostly follow rules when you need a chainsaw to cut down this tree.
Open the schools! Open all the schools!
Like, I want opera to be open too, but but who's gonna be able to go?
Yeah.
I mean, the only people who can see opera after they're dead are presumably zombies.
Or people in
Was that how we
group.
tied that back to Halloween, George?
This is my point. And I should preface this by, depending on which way you look at my contracts, I sort of work for Riccardo Muti. But Ricky, come on. No one can see opera if they're dead. Public health is not political. The world is on fire. I get what you're trying to say. Come on. Pull that lens back just a little bit. Think about the people that are, 3 employment tiers below you and how much health insurance they have. That's all I'm asking.
So the Opus 3 thing is sort of weird, and there's sort of a
Sort
tell. There's a sort of a tell
Extremely
even
weird.
in the statement. The fact that David Foster would even have to say, and we're not going to recruit people just from the conservatory. I mean, I get that they're looking at students that are, going through, but I always thought that getting representation, you had to have a bunch of work underneath your belt, not just people who are doing well in conservatory. But I feel like they tipped their hand here. Anyway.
They say arm's length. I wasn't quite sure. Are these, students being held at arm's length because they're stinky?
I mean, maybe there's going to be a chance to teach people more about, how this industry actually works, which is something that most conservatories, don't do enough to teach students about. So if that comes from this, that would be great, especially considering everything is totally upended and no one knows, where work is going to come from next anyway. But
and maybe during the lockdown, Opus 3 will offer mentorship to those conservatory students from some of their roster. That'd be really cool.
I mean, one other point, though. How much cash did SFCM just, have on hand that they could buy an artist management company?
Whose tuition dollars is that?
Exactly.
They should have used it to buy Quibi.
Well, okay, this is a mea culpa. I do apologize for single-handedly destroying Quibi with last week's episode.
You broke it.
It's okay, because we're going to get a great movie out of the fall of Quibi, produced by Jeffrey Katzenberg, just like Shrek was a takedown of the Disney company.
It's only going to be 10 minutes long, though, is the problem, and I apologize for that.
We're going to call it The Curse of Weston, which is basically every time Weston decides that he's going to predict something's going to collapse, we're all going to go like this.
And you'll say, roll tide.
Oh, God.
Ooh.
Good Call, Bad Call on Opera Box Score.
Thanks for hanging out with us wherever you are, however you're listening, if you're watching, too. Glad that you are here for the conversation about opera. Good Call, Bad Call. Going to start with Oliver Camacho.
Thanks. Well, I'm devastated that it's over. Lovecraft Country was incredible. There were so many great episodes. I wasn't on board with every single one of them, but I enjoyed watching all of them. The penultimate episode featured, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, Janai Brugger in a surprise cameo. And that music is now available where you get your music on all the streaming platforms and maybe even for purchase on iTunes. That music is by Laura Karpman and Raphael Sadiq. The score to the HBO series Lovecraft Country.
Matt Cummings.
Speaking of my hometown earlier, Pittsburgh Opera this week did a live streamed performance of Cozy, which was cut down to be pandemic length and set during the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic so that everyone, all the singers and audience members were wearing masks and socially distant.
I love
that is available to stream on their website until November 6th. And I highly recommend checking it out because it's a really cool way to make art in these times.
Weston Williams.
Well, speaking of COVID, the Greek National Opera has a kind of a fun COVID video out, which is a weird thing to say. It stars baritone Harris Adrianos informing patrons about COVID regulations in character, singing Madamina as Leporello from Don Giovanni. And it's very charming and a good reminder to wear your mask, people.
Ashlee Hardgrave.
So there's this newer podcast out called Smartless. It's Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes, and Will Arnett, which is an interesting combination. And they interview a lot of different folks. And the September 21st episode, I've been catching up on back episodes. The September 21st episode is with Gustavo Dudamel. And it's really interesting. Fun fact, Jason Bateman is a classical music fan. So to have somebody on the panel interviewing him who knows a bit about classical music, and then have folks, and of course Sean Hayes is a pianist, and then Will Arnett is, well, he's kind of the me, so he's cracking jokes in the corner. But it's just a really charming interview. Dudamel's lovely. It's just a nice palate cleanser for all of the heavier stuff that you might see. So, Smartless podcast from September 21st.
That's it for this week's edition of America's Talk radio show about opera. Our announcer is Norm Woodel at normwoodel.com, NORMWOODEL.com. Our theme song is Vodka Inferno, written and performed by the Diablo Swing Orchestra. On Facebook, search for Opera Box Score. Be sure to share and comment on our posts. On Twitter and Instagram, we're at Opera Box Score. Podcast version of our show is available on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts. The views and opinions expressed on Opera Box Score are solely those of the show's creative team. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of the accounts of this show without the express written consent of Opera Box Score would be totally cool. Our creative consultant is Oliver Camacho. Our audio and video editor is Weston Williams. A thank you to Lark in the Oak for arranging our interview with Benjamin Bernheim. For him and our co-hosts Matt Cummings and Ashlee Hardgrave, I'm George Cederquist, asking you to continue the conversation about opera while you steal Halloween candy from your sleeping children. We're back with an all-new show next week. Ashlee Hardgrave tells us about the nasty women of opera. It's our election episode with a very special surprise guest whom we can't tease yet because we don't want to get burned. Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, more vote counting. Join us!